I love this kid. It makes it sound. Oh, are we on?
Yes.
Oh.
Just some more moments in time, enjoying your drumming.
Moment in time. Okay,
Yes.
here we are.
All right.
Without further ado, as my friend used to say, down at the Playhouse. Without further ado.
Yes, without
Let me
further
get my
ado.
skirt off from underway. Okay.
Okay.
We are now in chapter 19, I believe,
Yes.
of Shackles Across Time.
Yes.
This here.
Shackles across time. There we go. Odie Hawkins.
And what we have going on is
Suspense.
our man Chester is out in the bush all by himself in a thatched hut,
Oh, Lord.
half naked,
Lifetime naked.
well, fully naked. Yeah, how can you be half naked?
Right.
Maybe it's like
Yeah.
a bit pregnant. He has no food. He's been told he would have to fast for at least 7 days. And this is not a particularly easy thing for him because he's a chap who loves his chop.
Yes, he does.
And, but the most important thing is that he would receive, he has been initiated into a system of spiritual cleaning. I remember the story of Miriam McCabe's mother, who was a Sangoma. She was a priest. And one of the things that she had to do is at the beginning was have, they call it the black water. They drank some decoction that forced them to vomit.
Oh, my.
And, I mean, just thoroughly, completely cleanse themselves out. At that point, from that point in time, and coupled to a number of other things, they were able to do things like locate coins. This is one of the tests. You're getting ready to have a test as a personal trainer. Think about this one. After having received the initiation and the cleansing and so forth and so on, they would hide a coin, let's say a 10-cent piece, and bring the Sangoma, the would-be Sangoma, into this hut and ask him to find it. And 9 times out of 10, they would locate it.
Okay.
And nobody could explain how it was done. They had a white man, a South African, who was initiated as a Sangoma. And once he became a part of that fraternity, he was sworn to secrecy. And when they, asked him, well, okay, come on, white guy, tell us what happened. He said, no, I'm a Sangoma.
I can't. That's honorable. He was an honorable man.
He was an honorable man.
Fantastic.
In this case with Chester, he's being put through a test to try to determine if his spirit is strong enough to tell the truth, if his spirit is strong enough to take the truth. You just can't give a message to an impure messenger. So
I see.
We were looking at it yesterday. As a matter of fact, it's sort of a similarity in my mind. Obama was talking to a group of people in Pennsylvania who he had asked to come in their cars, and he was talking about what it took to be a president, and explaining to the people assembled there and all of the millions of people watching television that the present occupant of the White House is not showing us what presidential behavior is supposed to be like. So everybody has rules and regulations, and the more and the better we follow them, the better off we are.
Good point. Rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's not law and order. Laws change, orders change, but people
decency
remain the same.
Yes, human decency. Gotcha.
We saw another example of it, and right after this little example, I'll go right into the reading of this. I believe it's on the Brian Williams show, MSNBC. Toward the end of the program, they always give you some little vignette of something happening in the country. In this particular instance, some man had died from some reason or other, and Joe Biden was at the funeral.
Oh, yeah.
Or the whatever it was. And he went to come over and say a few words of comfort to the family. And as he was turning away, one of the members of the family, a young man who has Down's syndrome, ran up to him because these are very special people. They don't shield
Very
their feelings.
sensitive, yes. Very
They get it all out.
Mm-hmm.
The vice president, the boy made a sound, and if you recall the scene, Biden turned around, and the boy ran up into his arms and grabbed him and hugged him. And Biden said, "Thank you for hugging me." He kissed him on the forehead.
He asked him, "Is he all right?" And the kid shook his head very vehemently.
Yeah, no,
and then
all right, I'm feeling
he hugged him and he rubbed his head, holding him
and he kissed him on the forehead.
Right, and he told him, "You will be all right. I promise you, you'll be all right."
The scene was called Empathy.
Yeah.
And going back and forth. This particular scene is designed to show the empathy that Chester will have or should have with the spirits and vice versa. And it's taking place out here in the forest.
In the bush.
In the bush. Chester had subconsciously fallen into a pattern. He prayed the minute his eyes opened each morning. It seemed to be a natural thing to do. And he prayed while he was sitting in the stream for his first bath of the day, if it wasn't raining. And he prayed in between times. It seemed to be the natural thing to do. He concentrated on the points that Grandfather Odie had told him to concentrate on. Asked for information from my ancestors, asked for their intercession to speak to Grandfather Boukman, to lay the curse aside. But he also found himself praying for many other things. He prayed a long time each day for world peace. He prayed for the welfare and the happiness of all the children in the world and for adults. He prayed for the sound and spirits of good music, for the taste of good things to eat.
So I can't eat them, but doesn't mean I can't think about them.
Boy hungry. Boy hungry. He was amazed to discover that he didn't feel hungry anymore. He wanted something to eat, but he didn't feel hungry. He could sit and daydream about wonderful meals he'd had that he'd shared with others, but there was no fierce hunger attached to his daydreams. Maybe I'm starving to death. Nah, people don't starve to death after a few days. He sat on the log in front of his hut trying to figure things out. What if the old man doesn't send me food? What do I do then? He felt himself becoming more reasonable. Or is it simply because I'm not trying to rush to think faster than someone else? He could sit for an hour mentally reviewing the angles of the situation. Well, if I don't get any food, I'll have to find some and then find my way out of here. The down-flowing stream inspired confidence in his ability to find people. There are probably some women washing clothes in this stream farther on down. They came to him in the middle of the night, on the 5th night of his stay in the forest. They woke him up without touching him, without making a sound. They came to him speaking as though they were carrying on conversations that had been interrupted. Chester Lewis? His mother had always called him Chester Lewis. Keep on thinking positive and everything gonna be okay.
Aww.
He stared at the snippet of her cameoed face in the hole in the roof, and he fed on the lush chords of her Mississippi accent. His father smiled, winked at him, smoothed his mustache,
As
the way he always
do.
did.
Yeah.
Uncle John wasn't too happy to see him naked in the middle of a Ghanaian forest.
What?
Now, Chester, you know this don't make a bit of sense. You down and out, living in a tree house in the middle of the jungle, stark raving naked. If things wasn't going too well with you, you should have said something last time you was in Chicago. You know I would have loaned you a couple of grand. Same old Uncle John, sweet note. Aunt Bessie, Aunt Mary, Aunt Mamie, his 3 aunts, flashed past in rapid succession, each one whispering a bit of advice. Stay strong. Find yourself a good black woman. Save your money, you'll never be broke. Uncle Eugene and Luella and Uncle Percy just stared at him without a change of expression. Grandma and Grandpa Dave pulled up a star table and a couple of star chairs, leaned forward on their elbows and spoke in earnest. Grandma first, as usual. Chester, we've been talking to this old man Boukman about this curse and all, about the idea of giving that some slack. But he ain't budging too much, Grandpa interjected. No, sir, he ain't budging a bit. He's a stubborn old coot. You know how men are when they get up in an age. I don't know what you talking about, woman. You 2 years older than me. Well, there ain't no May December thing happening here, I can bet you that. Chester wanted to interrupt his paternal grandparents' celestial bantering, but Uncle only smiled. They're still having fun with each other. Chester, we're going to keep after this old coot. You hear me? We're going to break him down. We're going to try to break him down. Ain't that what you mean? They pushed the chairs back and left their seats. He was left staring at a sparkling star table in the center of the hole in the roof. He placed both hands over his eyes to blot out the sight of the stars and peeked through his fingers, hoping to see more of the figures he was praying. What if God came to me? The thought caused him to sit up in his banana leaf bed and then to step outside of his hut. Whatever it is out here can get a piece of me if it wants to. He sat on his log chair and stared into the forest right in front of him. It gets thicker each time it rains, and it's getting growing closer and closer to me. The forest no longer made him shudder with fear when he looked into it that night. What if God came to me? He felt solemn, moved to a level of seriousness he'd never felt before. What would I say to God? What would God say to me? There was no argument in his mind for the non-existence of a supreme being. Who else could sprinkle the sky full of stars? Thoughts swam through his subconsciousness, wayward ideas swimming upstream to spawn. Concepts about people, places, and things settled in corners of his brain for nanoseconds before joining the electrical circuits that made him feel more alive than he'd ever felt in his life. He was thinking, and his thought took him through the night. He wasn't surprised to see the sun rise through the underbrush and over the trees. The passage of time was now linked to day and night, not to hours and minutes. Who cares what hour it is? He stood, stretched, and slowly made his way to the stream to drink, bathe, and pray. After his bath, he decided to explore his neck of the woods. He leaned his stick across his right shoulder and began walking a clockwise circle near his hut. He kept the hut and the clearing to his left to prevent himself from being lost. He could hear the sound of the stream to his right, which gave him a sense of being oriented as he pushed and jabbed his way through the dense underbrush with his stick. Chester stared at the pile of waste on the narrow path he was following. 3 large, perfectly symmetrical turds. He quickly looked up and around him. Who could have left these? He studied the 3 turds. They were flecked with reddish streaks. Must be a fair-sized animal to have droppings this large. He turned away from the waste matter in front of him to retrace his steps back to his starting point, but decided to take one last look at the turds. The laughter bubbled out of his guts. He laughed so hard tears came. He laughed so hard he felt weak and had to lean on his stick. His laughter became contagious, and animals who were normally resting during the day began to respond to his laughter with their own sound. Lord have mercy, what's going to become of me? I can't recognize my own shit when I see it. No.
Could bury it. Okay, while he's at it.
We know cats who leave. He
Alright.
continued his little circular exploration, pausing to laugh out loud from time to time. Life ain't a piece of cake. It's a turd of shit. He smelled all of it before the man strolled into the clearing. The powerful aromas of fish stew, kinky, the metal pots it was stored in, the perfume of the man's deodorant. Chester stood as Grandfather O'Day's son lifted two metal pots from his head, one filled with fish stew, the other with kinky. They nodded pleasantly to each other. The son didn't seem to notice that Chester was naked, that he had lost 15 pounds, that he needed a shave, that his hair was frizzled from lack of grooming. My father says, good wishes. He wishes you to know that negotiations are going well, that the spirits seem to be receptive to your requests. So how much longer do I have to stay out here? Chester blurted out. The son stared at the ground for a moment and locked his eyes into Chester's. I don't know. I can't say. Only the spirits can tell us that. They stared into each other's eyes, trying to convey emotions that were too deep to talk about. What if this, whatever it is, takes months, years? Chester could sense that the man wanted to leave. He wanted to hold on to him for a while, to squeeze a few answers out of him. Tell me this, when matters have been settled, when the negotiations are complete, then I'll come back, right? Exactly. Well, tell me now, what can I do to speed things up? Grandfather O'Day's son smiled back at Chester's question. Mr. Simmons, you are doing as much as you can do. There's nothing else that you can do at the moment. Sorry. Grandfather O'Day wants you to speak directly to Grandfather Boukman. He feels that it might have a good effect. Chester nodded numbly. Why not? Everything is possible. Grandfather O'Day's son reached over to pat Chester on the arm. Don't worry, Mr. Simmons. Things are going well. I will return in 3 days. Chester had the illusion that the man had opened a door into the forest and walked through it. There was no sign of him. Chester stared down at the metal pots, smelled the delicious aromas. If it weren't for the pots of food being here, I would swear that I was hallucinating. He strolled slowly to the stream to wash himself before eating. He became fully conscious of his nakedness when he sat in the water. Oh my God, the brother must be thinking I've become a savage or something. He laughed for a long time, an aperitif for his dinner. It only took half a kinky, a piece of fish, and a little stew to fill him up. He had read somewhere that the stomach shrinks when it's not being constantly stuffed with food. He could see his ribs flying out of his sides like slats, and his stomach was as flat as it was when he was 15, 5,000 Italian dinners ago. He said he'll be back in 3 days. I better save some of this. He placed the pots at the rear of his hut and felt the immediate urge to defecate. Wow, that stew must have went right through me. I better be careful where I do my business. I'll be thinking there's a Bigfoot out here with me.
Mm-hmm.
Chester felt the weight pressing on his chest and squirmed to remove the pressure, but he couldn't turn to the right or left. He squirmed against other bodies. They too were squirming, fighting for a little space. Almost like having an out-of-body experience, he exited his body to look at what was happening from another perspective. Men, women, children were packed into the hold of a slave ship. Many of the men were chained to the deck. They were all packed together, sloshing around in their own waste. It was a coffin they were in, and only the strongest would survive the voyage, the dreaded middle passage. He re-entered his body and fought off claustrophobia. Many of the captives had gone insane because of the conditions. Some had committed suicide in various ways, by scratching their wrists open until they bled to death, by biting their wrists open, by clawing away at their jugular veins until the blood spurted out. Some of them had literally willed themselves to death, while others, barely able to breathe the diseased air, plotted against their captors and their escape from the horrible situation they were in. The ship rocked away through a savage storm, making many of the captives seasick, adding their vomit to the other waste. No light, just a dark hole in the middle of the ocean, and the accompaniment of a loud groaning sound that resembled a ghostly scream. The groaning scream came from the captives. Many were not aware that they were screaming or why. It was a primeval response to the terrible unknown they were facing every minute of every hour. Chester heard the scream, listened to it for a long beat before he realized that he was the one screaming. The cosmic rage bellowed up through his body, a rage that caused him to cry bitterly, even though his eyelids were tightly shut. He screamed again, a long, drawn-out howl that seemed to push the leaves of the hut out with its power. He screamed for a long time and then woke up to find something sticky on the palms of his hands. He had dug the nails of his fingers into the palms of his hands so tightly he had drawn blood. He felt the presence of the man before he saw him. The man sat near the hut entrance, surrounded by a feathery, soft glow. He held a beautifully carved walking stick across his knees. Grandfather Odie? The hair on the back of Chester's neck stiffened when he heard the cracked, raspy voice. It wasn't Grandfather Odie's voice. It was the voice of Grandfather Boukman, the man who had pronounced the curse on the Quartet centuries and generations ago. I am not Odie. I'm Boukman. Odie's father, many times removed. He had begged me to speak with you, so I came. But before I came here, knowing what you want of me, I decided to give you a small taste of what my grandson Kofi had to endure. Words froze in Chester's throat. What could he say to this force from the past? The old man, short and wizened but quite agile, sprang up from his seat. You see how it is now. You see why I would never want to lay the curse aside. They took my grandson away. I was placed in my grave without having my closest male relative say the proper rites for me. But he returned. Chester spoke carefully, finding the right tone. After my death, the old man spoke bitterly. A distant hoot announced that an owl was hunted. He had grown to recognize the call. Grandfather Odie? No, Boukman. Sorry, sir, sorry. Grandfather Boukman, I beg you to listen to me. I have been asked to come here to find out what can be done to lift this terrible burden from the hearts, minds, bodies, and souls of many innocent people. The old man spat on the floor. Nothing can be done, nothing. The traitor Quartet took my blood. While I curse his family, his descendants, it is fair. But sir, with all due respect, you only lost one family member way back then. We're still losing family members right now. Somehow it doesn't seem right to have people who have no knowledge of the traitor Quartet's sin against you suffer. The night was cool, but Chester could feel a moist film of perspiration on his face. He was desperately afraid of saying the wrong thing. Maybe the old man would put a curse on me too. Someone should have thought of the consequences before they did what they did. Remember, one must pay a price for doing things without thinking. You're right, sir. You're right. Absolutely right. But how many of us can go through our lives without making mistakes? The old man leaned his cane against the branches holding up the hut and stared at Chester for a hard moment. Do you know that no one has ever spoken to me about this matter? No one. Chester pulled his chin into his neck and tried to look as humble as possible. The old man's glare softened slightly. Where's your fire? Chester shrugged helplessly in the dim light. I don't have one. The old man shook his head in disbelief, the way grandfathers have always done. Go outside and gather some wood. He felt a chill passing the old man. No wonder he wants a fire. Moments later, scrambling frantically around his clearing, he managed to collect an armful of dead wood. He re-entered the hut just as the old man struck sparks from flint and steel to start a smoldering fire in a small wad of moss. The old man bent and blew carefully on the moss. In the second it burst into flame, he placed a few small branches on the fire and then larger branches. Within minutes, they had a beautiful star-shaped fire in the center of the hut. Chester luxuriated in the warmth. He hadn't been warm at night for a week. The old man stared into the flames, seemingly oblivious to Chester's presence. After a few minutes of listening to the sounds of the forest and the crackling of the fire, the old man spoke. You have shown yourself to be a serious, dedicated person to come here, to do what you are doing. When my son Odie, who is my son many times removed, appealed to me to allow you to approach me with your petition, I said to him, hey, let us see if this man is serious, if he is sincere. Bring him to your compound and purge him, and then place him in the bush with no food. Then we will see what he's made of. Despite the fire, Chester still shivered. Now what? I must leave now, but I'm going to think hard on your petition. I would think very hard on it. And he was gone. A moment later, he ducked back into the hut to retrieve the cane he had left. Yeah, you know how it is with old men. Chester held his palm out to the fire and stared at the blood on the palms of his hands. His time spent in the bowels of the slave ship had been too real to be a nightmare. He knew somehow that the master Bokor, Grandfather Boukman, had caused him to have 10 minutes of an experience that would last him forever. Writing on the subject of African American slavery would no longer be theoretical, distant, abstract. He had survived the hell of the middle passage, courtesy of Grandfather Boukman. He added a few more branches to the fire and sat in place, staring into the flames. None of this is real.
The warm. You didn't make that fire by yourself.
Where did the fire come from? I don't even know how to make it. I have my matches.
They got no matches, flint, forget
my
flint.
cigarette lighter. How am I going to explain this to people where I came from? If I get the opportunity to tell people about this stuff, I'm having a hard time believing it myself. What the hell are they doing? What are they going to think? Oh, well, I just cross that bridge when I come to it. He banked his fire very carefully and curled up beside it to stare into the smoldering flames. Oh, nice to have a fire. I'll heat up my stew tomorrow evening, maybe tomorrow morning. Well, I'm going to read 20 and let it go at that, because it's getting to be a bit much.
Whew. Yes, it is.
I'm telling you, it's getting to be much. 3 days later, Grandfather Odie's son came to fetch him from the forest, bringing him a new t-shirt, underwear, and shorts. Mr. Simmons, please come with me, please. Chester paused at the edge of the clearing to look back at his hut, at his home.
Yes.
He had bittersweet memories of the place. In 10 short days, he had been more afraid than he had ever been in his life and felt braver than he'd ever felt. The area around the hut was beginning to envelop the clearing and the hut. In another week, I would have been walking out of the door right into the forest. The familiar gurgle of the nearby stream made him smile. Oh, so many wonderful baths. He followed Grandfather O'Day's son closely, and when his eyes were not directly on his back, he could see the pots on his head moving as though they were floating in midair. After a half hour walking through the forest, he was amazed to see his favorite restaurant, Terrace, perched on the side of a hill. I was this close to a cold beer and didn't even know it. He wanted to speak to his guide, but he couldn't recall his name. My brother, I seem to have forgotten your name. I'm Grandfather O'Day's eldest son. It would be very difficult for you to learn how to say this in our language. Could I call you O'Day Jr.? Yes, that would be fine. I just want to ask you, did you take the same route on the way to the hut? Exactly the same route, Mr. Simmons. Exactly. It seemed like a long way to get there, a long time. That's the way it seems sometimes. He heard and smelled the compound 200 yards away. His hearing and smell were more acute. He was certain of that after 10 days of natural living. Chester wasn't prepared for his reception. Children ran to meet him, to stare up into his face with angelic smiles. One little girl grabbed him and hugged him around his knees. He picked her up, kissed her bubbly cheeks, and gently lowered her back to the ground. The women and girls paused in their work to chant a lovely little song as he passed. O'Day Jr., what are they saying? They say, he went to the bush for a meeting with the ancestors. That's all. And now he has returned. Oh, now? Benches were set up on Grandfather O'Day's veranda, and a young woman immediately came to them with a pitcher of water and 2 glasses on a tray. Chester drank half a glass of water and poured the rest of it on the ground, a salutation to the ancestors. The water tasted foul to him, full of rust and chemicals. After a few minutes, Grandfather O'Day strolled out of his hut, looking as though he had just had a long nap. Mr. Simmons, you're welcome, he said in a formal voice and sat next to him on the bench.
That's interesting.
So, how is it? The old man asked.
Tell me.
I'm coming. Chester couldn't stop himself from smiling. It was such a typical Ghanaian question. So how is it? Could take in so much ground. It could mean, how's your health? How's life treating you? What did you do yesterday night? What are you planning to do today, as well as a couple other things? I'm well, Grandfather O'Day, very well indeed. Yes, I know, the old man replied and smiled in his direction. They sat silently for a few minutes watching the rhythm of the compound of his village. Chester felt relaxed, clear-headed. Mr. Simmons, your driver, Manuel, will collect you this evening for your journey back to Accra. I must say this to you before you return. You have made a good impression upon the ancestors, and your petition is being seriously studied. I myself am in favor of laying the curse aside. Chester went down on his right knee as he shook the old man's hand with gratitude. Thank you, Grandfather O'Day, thank you. Your clothes are there. You must bathe and chop with us before you return to the city. Chester could tell that the old man didn't have a lot of love for the city from the way his lips curled down as he said the word. He stood and bowed to the Odie Hawkins as he crossed the compound to his hut. He stared at his hollow cheeks after he shaved. He liked the look.
Ha 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 ha.
I think I'm going to make a bigger effort to eat healthier from now on.
That's good.
There was something else he saw in his face that he couldn't quite find the words for, a more mature look, perhaps. The staccato notes of a high-pitched drum told him it was time. He peeked out of his window into the large space in front of the center of the compound. It had been transformed to a festival space with a fire in the center and women dancing. He strolled from his hut, feeling dapper in beige slacks and an ivory white short-sleeved shirt. The young men whom he'd not seen before were there, wearing their finest, but it was the sight of the women dancing that held his interest. This has got to be the best African dance I've seen since the last time I saw the National Dance Ensemble of Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
Grandfather O'Day signaled for him to come to his side where he had a chair placed for him.
Mm-hmm.
A young girl brought him a small calabash of caramel-colored liquid. He took a tentative sip and then swallowed all but a few drops that he spilled on the ground, thanking his ancestors and the unknowable for giving him life. O'Day Jr., what was the drink I just had? We call it corn wine. The dancers moved across the compound area from right to left, telling ancient stories, creating modern stories. Chester was reduced to hysterical laughter by this satirical imitation of his entrance to the compound. The man imitating his curious expression, the way his eyes tried to take in everything.
They saw him. They
were right on the money. The dancers flowed from one story to another, from one dance to another. And someone was constantly offering a tidbit of this and that, plus the palm wine and gin. He was feeling very high when he saw Emmanuel, the driver, enter the compound and circle the dancing area with a big smile on his face. Mr. Simmons, I have come. I see that you've come here. Have a cold beer. Sorry, sir, I cannot take it. The beer will make me sleepy. Oh, yes. Well, you don't mind if I do? No, please enjoy yourself.
Certainly need to.
10 days with no alcohol?
No alcohol, no, well, basically almost no food.
No food.
7 days, 7 days.
People smiled at him, muttered friendly greetings to him. He couldn't really figure out why they were celebrating. After 3 well-chilled ABC lagers, he didn't particularly care.
Everybody's happy. You happy?
Grandfather O'Day leaned over to pat him on the knee. Don't worry. I think everything will be okay. 2 hours later, Grandfather O'Day and O'Day Jr. poured Chester into his returning vehicle, shaking his hand and reassuring him, we think everything will be okay. Don't worry. Chester slipped 2 $100 bills to the driver to slip to O'Day Jr., who would then slip it to Grandfather O'Day. He knew the etiquette. No one had ever spoken about payment for anything, but he knew what the bottom line was. Everything has a price. He could tell he had scored a lot of brownie points from the expression that lit up Emmanuel's face. Ah, Mr. Simmons, this is a lot of money. I know, and they deserve it for giving me so much help. The drummers gave him a crescendo. The dancers and singers chanted and swayed as they slowly drove away. Chester leaned out of the passenger side and called out to Grandfather O'Day. When? When will I know? When will we know? When the spirits tell me, I will tell you. Chester remained in place, staring at the scene he was leaving, feeling a little blue because he had to go. A misting rain fell as Chester waited to be received by Charles Boukman, the aristocrat. He stared at the mist as it coated the picture window. Just think, a few days ago, I was in a leaf hut in the middle of the forest, buck naked.
Don't tell anybody.
Buck naked, fasting, and now here I am in the lap of luxury. A few minutes later, Charles Boukman shuffled across the huge room, a purple caftan with gold thread at the neck and hemline, swathing his well-fed body. Chapter 21 is the end of it, and I'm going to leave that until tomorrow evening.
Fantastic.
And there it is.
Woo! Thank you, O'Day.
You know, if you've ever been asked to give up something for something, it's called in that ball. If you've ever been asked to give up something for something, giving up something for something, it's not quid pro quo. That's something else. That's kind of nasty. Had to figure that out for a minute. My glasses didn't want to see me. I thought somebody was holding my glasses and turning them around.
May have been the spirits. Yes.
Yeah, if you've ever had to give up something in order to get something, and usually, I think the things are equal. Yeah. Usually, you know, you give me that, and I give you this, or I give you this, you give me that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like when we had barter. That's what it's.
Oh yes.
You know, I think about stories that they tell about Native Americans here when Europeans came. Like they bought Manhattan for $24 worth of bees. They put the bees. They're still doing it in the Amazon and places. The missionaries bring some items that they know that the people could use, like iron axes, steel axes, and they put them on the ground. And the native people come, get the axes, and bring what they have. It might be berries or something that they think is equal to it. And gradually, they begin to meet in the middle. I picture Speaker Pelosi and that horrible bastard called McConnell. I picture him wanting to get more out of her than she's willing to give. And being a clever, good negotiator, she said, no, I'm going to get as much for the American people from you as I can.
Should be fair.
You think that giving people $300
that is no
a
money
week
at all.
is
no money at all.
While your people make $300,000 a week or whatever it is. And I'll just leave the matter at rest at this point because it just makes me mad to think about it. Anyway, that's where we are with Shackles Across Time.
Why, thank you very much. Shackles Across Time can be purchased on Amazon, Author House, Barnes & Noble.
Are you talking about this book here?
I am talking about that book there. And you can go to your local bookstore or call them and say, I want a copy of Odie Hawkins' book, Shackles Across Time.
And the cover was designed by Salena-Hawkins. Don't forget to tell them that. I don't want any other book by any other name with a cover designed by any other person other than Salena-Hawkins. If you don't have that, then Lil Duck.
Anyway, you are also on the author's page on Amazon. Your website is www.odiehawkins.com. If you like this reading, this video, please hit the like button below, the little hand, and subscribe to our channel. These Moments in Time with Odie and Zoe.
See you later, Alfred.
See you later, Val. Bye. All y'all.